Hi, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner.
And our dog, Betty White.
Your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Could we have named it something more creative? Probably. But it's the name of our blog. It's our last name. We're on an adventure. Yada, yada, yada. After owning our own business, working 24/7.
And don't forget a mental breakdown in between.
We made a lifestyle change and decided to make the most out of life.
We sold our house, most of our belongings, downsized, and moved to the coast.
We live life minimally, but fully.
We live each day as an adventure.
This show will help you learn how to live life more fully, with more intention, by experiencing more, and with less stuff.
We'll talk about our own experiences, interview others who have much to share by creating a spark in our lives.
Some days we'll share real-life ongoings of what we're going through, and others will talk about our favorite flavor of waffle.
Come join our adventure.
It's the Arner Adventures Podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Jerry.
Betty White is here as always, and we're back for episode 70 of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Wow. 70. Can you believe it?
No.
Well, today's guest has been a podcaster for a decade, so 70, she's probably done 7,000. So 70 is just a drop in the bucket for her.
Yeah. You know, she's just listening to this going, 70? You guys are just kids.
Yeah.
70.
She said, I do 70 when I'm sleeping.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to today's guest, let's get to our review of the week.
Oh, yeah. Today's review comes from Law Dog. Law Dog. I wonder if he's from North Carolina. That sounds like
probably
some of our dialects. Law Dog says, more Betty White, please.
And that's all. That's all the review is. But we loved it. And Betty White really wanted us to highlight Law Dog, which, by the way, it's Law Dog, Doggg. It was a 5-star review, too. So, Law Dog, thank you for not docking us any stars, even though you want more Betty White.
We'll have to get old B-Dubs, that's Betty White, her own mic, you think?
I think we'll set her up a little mic.
A little mic. She's got a lot to say.
She, especially at mealtime, she has a whole lot to say.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast.
If you do want more Betty White, maybe you could replay the episode that we interviewed Betty White on and talked about her. You know, maybe Law Dog hasn't run across that one yet.
Maybe not.
Or maybe he just thought, hey, that was just one episode. I need a little bit more Betty White.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah.
He's like, that one only went an hour. I need another hour.
Yeah.
With B-Dubs.
Well, thank you, Law Dog, by the way, for taking the time. And we just loved it. And so did Betty White. Well, today's guest is someone we refer to as our people. Actually, most of the guests are our people. But today's guest was, it was just an honor to have her on the show. It's Julie Coraccio.
Julie is a renowned author, podcast host, and minimalist, though she doesn't refer to herself as a minimalist. But we get into that. We
definitely get into that with her. It's a fun conversation. Should we go ahead and get to it?
Oh, let's go.
Well, you heard us say earlier how excited we are about today's episode. It vibes in the most wonderful ways to have this guest on. We are thrilled to welcome Julie Coraccio. Julie is an award-winning professional organizer, author, speaker, and certified life coach who works with people all over the world. She's the host of the very popular podcast, Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out. It's on our podcast rotation, and we love it. Julie is passionate about supporting people in creating the life they choose, deserve, and desire by teaching the skills of recognizing and clearing clutter in their lives. Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, all things we align with. Julie, this is just an honor. I'm so thankful that you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. Well, we like to have a mental picture of, where you are. So where are you coming to us from?
Wheeling, West Virginia. It's where I grew up, and my husband and I moved back last year.
Okay. I don't think I'm putting this out there because it's on your website. I did see the 919, which is also my phone number. And I thought, oh my gosh, is she in North Carolina? And I didn't know that.
For a long time, for 12, 13 years, maybe it was 14. We were in Raleigh.
Well, we're from Raleigh. That's crazy. What a small world it is.
It is.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're back. there, if that's a good thing for you, that you're you're also happy to be back.
It's where I grew up, so there's good and bad, but we moved back to help
Yeah.
care for my mom, and my husband was
Oh.
a rock star about that, and no regrets for that.
Oh, wonderful. What a wonderful daughter you are to be able to come back and do that as well. So, well, oh gosh, we have so much synergy, and then also we just want to know so much more, but I want to go ahead and get started in I'm always curious how people got to where they are when they are in the mindset of not having tons of clutter and stuff. And you are even a professional organizer. So what is your personal journey with clutter? And have you always been like that, or did something click and you're like, okay, I gotta declutter my life? What's your journey towards that lifestyle?
I would say so I moved around a lot. Grew up in West Virginia, went to college in Massachusetts, then I worked in Maine, Vermont, and I'm like, "Hey, let's go out to Los Angeles, let's come to North Carolina, let's when so traveling a lot, then I would always like get rid of stuff, right? I'm like,
Hmm.
it's cost if you have to ship it. I moved out to California, a little two-door Honda Civic, and everything I own fit in that. So that's been a part of it. And then the other thing that happened when I was living in Los Angeles, people are like, you're kind of uptight, you can help me declutter, you can help me get organized. So I was doing that before I even knew it was a profession. And then, every time I'd move, I'd lighten my load. My husband and I have downsized twice. We downsized, and then my mom got sick, and we're like, okay, as soon as 2 years is up, we're going to sell the house and move back. And so that's what we did last summer. Or was it summer before? I can't keep track. Anyway,
Mm.
so multiple times of doing this. And then I had this client, and when I first started my business, and I recommend this, never change your name because it's a pain in the bum, but it was healing through organization, because I'm like, what can I do where I can use my skill set, and I got to get paid. I got to eat. I was single at the time. And how can I make a difference in people's lives? That's really where my focus was. I'm like, oh, organizing. And then I had this client. So at the meantime, I'm doing healing through organization, and I started an internet TV show where I'd go to a studio, and it was called Reawaken Your Brilliance, and fell in love with the name. And I'd interview body, mind, spirit experts, which is my total jam. So I'm doing
Uh-huh.
all this personal growth work, and I have this client, and she said, can we just talk? And I was like, hey, you're the client. And so when I do decluttering, I work in 4-hour chunks usually, unless it's with a senior. And because, if you have a lot of stuff, you're not going to notice much progress if you only do an hour or two. So I said,
Mhm.
let's talk. So we talked for about 3 hours, kind of what her clutter was about, where it stemmed from. And then in that hour, bam, boy, did she clear a lot. So we got kind of the root cause. And I was like, this is the aha moment. It's about the clutter, and it's about figuring out what's underneath, and then it's easy to do. It's less about the organizing, because you can go into a huge home and not get rid of any clutter and have everything organized, and
Mhm.
that's not how I roll. So then I was like, okay, we've got to focus on the clutter. So I got into, no one was really talking about mental clutter and emotional clutter, and I'm like, but that's all the stuff I do in my personal growth work. So it was about marrying that.
Right. Do you find, I probably know the answer to this, but do you find that, you know, they always, anything I ever read says, if you want to gift someone with a professional organizer, it's either going to be wonderful because they're ready, or you think that their things are a mess, and they're like, oh, it's a mess, I just need help getting this organized. But do you find that most people you work with have to be in a certain kind of mindset to be able to move forward, because it's just going to revert back
A
if it's
thousand
not?
percent. I think you
Yeah.
have to get to that acceptance first, and you have to reach, at least with the people I work with, you know what? I'm stuck. I'm overwhelmed. I know something has to change. I don't know if I quite know what that is, but I'm ready. I can't
Mm.
do this any longer.
Hmm. So we're talking about mental clutter. We believe, and I think it is what leads to physical clutter, but we believe it can often be more harmful than the physical clutter. How do you feel like people are, when you go and work with them, do you feel like they understand that there is mental clutter? Are they just looking at things?
I think it's a mixture of both, depending on the person. Some people have that realization. Some people understand that as we go through the work. And, as you do your inner work, that reflects in your outer environment. As you do your
Mm-hmm.
outer work, it reflects in your inner environment. And one thing that I try to stress with people is I really want them to see the bigger picture of clutter. And so For an example, if you have a super messy desk, that's affecting your mental state.
Yeah.
Or it's affecting, not only is it affecting that, but it could be preventing you from getting a job promotion, or it could be preventing you from getting clients. Because if you were to walk into it, you'd be like, I'm not going to work with this person. What if they lose my documents? Or if you have a
Yeah.
stuffed closet, you might be preventing a relationship from blossoming, because they come in, see that stuffed closet. Oh man, I don't want to deal with that. If their closet's like that, what else is kind of stuffed, or what could be lurking behind all that? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. I'm curious, when you start working with someone, do you get a lot of pushback when you start talking about that, or do people start going, it starts clicking and they start realizing it as well?
That starts clicking. And I found
Mm,
once we start this work, people are like, hey, I did this on my own today, right? Because
mm,
sometimes people think, oh, I'm not good at this. I don't have the skill set. And that's not true at all. It's something you can learn.
right. So did you grow up with things or any of that, or was it, or did you grow up with these practices into place then as well?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say I would say probably in the middle. Like, it's not something we practice, but my dad was an attorney, and so he was super organized. Have always just been organized. I did sports and did extracurricular activities. So you've got a lot of stuff to juggle. So I think I was always that way, personality wise. And love my mom, but my mom was never on time, and that drove me insane.
Oh,
So I was going to do anything I could to do that. But mom was, had her own business. She volunteered a lot. So she was super active and was like always meal planning and was organized as well. So it was a little of both. And we definitely weren't people that we had stuff. We never lacked for anything,
mhm.
but we had stuff, but not like, I always remember, oh my gosh, people got all that at Christmas. Like, that wasn't our household at all. I remember when my
Right.
mom was sick with pneumonia and was in the hospital for a month, and her friends got us stuff for Christmas. And I was like, gosh, this is the most we've ever gotten, because they
Yeah.
just, well, like, my parents wouldn't have gotten us that much.
This episode is brought to you by Sugar Wish.
Sugar Wish is our gift go-to. What better gift is there than a consumable?
And by consumable, we mean that Sugar Wish allows you to give someone candy, coffee, wine, cookies, cotton candy, popcorn, savory snacks.
And don't forget doggy treats for your doggy gifts.
The best part is that Sugar Wish is big on saving us time. You just order on their website.
They send the gift via email or text to the recipient and arrives whenever you want.
Sugar Wish does not waste my time, but actually saves me time. Yes, please.
Use code Betty White. That's all caps, one word, Betty White, to save $7 off of your gift to someone.
Or you can head over to arneradventures.com/sugarwish to grab the code and link there.
Yep, that's arneradventures.com/sugarwish. It's also in the show notes.
Now back to the show.
So I'd say a little bit in the middle.
I'm curious because whenever someone has the mindset of not having the more things than they need, always wanting to declutter, and your organizational mindset, I'm always curious as to how they grew up. Like I love my mom too, and she's, I'm sure, listening to this, but she was also always late. That drove me insane, like it did you. And also, it was a time thing with her. She wasn't very, she's so much better now, but she wasn't very organized with her time. She had a lot going on, a lot of things juggled. So I felt like when I look back now, things were just out of control. Like she was a single mom and things were just all over the place and getting me and my brother to different things like you're talking about. It was just never streamlined. And so sometimes I look back and say, oh, okay, maybe this is my way of sort of, I don't know, remedying that from growing up. I don't know. I'm just always curious about that journey. So how do you think that clutter extends for someone beyond the physical things and then gets into, mental and spiritual clutter as well?
Obviously, everything's individual, but as I mentioned earlier, like, as you work on the inner, it'll reflect the outer a lot. And I see that connection with everyone that I work. So, mental clutter to me are things like insomnia or worry, right? I can't control it. Either certain things in my life I can control, a bunch of stuff's out of my control. So why waste the time worrying? But when I talk about mental clutter, that's where monkey mind. Or I know when I started my business, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. Is like I could have spent 24/7 on that. Emotional clutter to me are things like knee-jerk reactions, getting angry all the time. Spiritual clutter to me is like not having gratitude, not forgiving is huge. I mean, we talk about if you feel you're in lack, then there's a tendency that you might have more clutter because I've got to get stuff because it won't be here in the future or I've lacked it in the past. And so, making that connection for people, I think is really important.
Right. I might sound like I'm trying to, I don't even know how to explain what I'm about to say, but it does remind me of my dog, Betty. Betty, she is a resource hoarder where she didn't have anything. So they found her, she's rescued. And sometimes when I think about how she just hoards her things, like she goes and takes her toys and puts them together, or she can't eat with other pets around.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes I relate that, like what you just said, to people. It's like, well, no, I need all this. I need all this. I don't want someone to take this. And it's almost like a fear mentality.
1,000%. Now, hoarders are a special issue because I don't work with hoarders, but there's a mental health component going on with that. But I would say a lot of people I work with, there's not as to the extreme as hoarder. But as you talked about, if I didn't grow up with, my husband grew up incredibly poor. And so I've had to say, like, it's okay. We can let that go. Like, we're going to be taken care of. And it's, by consistently doing that. But I'm like, I completely understand why that would happen. And, addition to that, add in, at least I know everyone over the world listens to you, but at least for America, I feel I can speak on, we have this Instagram and consumerism and, that pushes many people. Like, I've got to keep up with the Joneses. And, we see this fake, unreal life and think, well, and that's what we're bombarded with in media every day. I've just got to accumulate. So I think that's an additional challenge. Like, even if you're like, okay, you're constantly being bombarded with these messages. And, for a lot of people, that's hard to overcome.
I'm thinking about too, with presentation being so curated and all of that, it reminds me of, and I know people do this. I mean, I know people in my life who do this, but it reminds me of like Monica on Friends, where she had the closet with all the stuff in it, but on the outside, everything looked great.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people have that.
I think they do. And it's usually for not everywhere, but there's usually at least like the closet or the basement, garage, and attics. They can become huge dumping grounds for people.
Yes. I will not mention any names, but the business that we had before this, we would be in people's homes a lot. And so I just remember sometimes just thinking, wow, these people have it all together. Everything is so smooth. And then you go into the garage to get a leash or dog food or something, and you go, oh my God. And then you go, oh. And so it's interesting. Where does that come from? It's obviously they want it to look like they have it together. And then I guess it's sort of that quote unquote feeling normal, feeling like you're accepted by having it together, even though you've got this dumping ground, like you're saying.
Right. And it goes into the spiritual and all the health and all the other stuff as well, because we present this put togetherness, but might not know they're struggling with depression or, they get angry all the time or whatever it is.
Right. Well, I want to talk about minimalism because, I think there's a bunch of different ways people can look at minimalism. And when I say how Jerry and I are minimalists and, our lifestyle is a minimalist lifestyle, I think a lot of people think, oh, you don't have anything. And our viewers, our listeners can't see, but like behind me, Jerry has his albums like in a wall display. And I've been on meetings with people before where they go, well, there's albums behind you, like you have stuff. And then I start doubting, well, maybe I shouldn't use the term minimalism, but we know that you've mentioned on your podcast that minimalism is not a way that you describe yourself. would you say that you implement minimalist practices? Or like, how do you describe her? Do you just say, look, I have what I need and I don't need anything else? Like, how would you describe your
That's
lifestyle?
interesting. Now, I'll tell you what I wanted to before we were chatting, because I love the album background. And I'll tell you one of the things that I equate, and this is just my thinking, I equate minimalism with austerity. And I'm going to use the example, the Kardashians drive me nuts. Kanye West drives me nuts. They are not people to be exemplified.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing this house and I'm like, ooh. And it was all like maybe sculptural middle. I'm like, gross. I'm like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to be a kid grown. That just looks nasty. And then I'm like, well, let me see the kid's room and her closet, because they are nowhere near being minimalist. But to me, that kind of is a good example of how I view that. I'm not saying that's correct, but
Yeah.
I see some people who are like, we're minimalist, and I'm like, my mom was a painter, so I've got like 10 paintings up in my office because I love her, and she's here with me, and so I see a minimalist as being, oh my gosh, that's too many paintings. And I see like non-color and like life. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I love her album covers because they're colorful and
Yeah.
that's awesome to me, and says the opposite of that. So I would say I wouldn't call myself a minimalist, because if I was a minimalist, I think I'd be in a teeny home, or we have cats and I'm like, we'll never not have a home, because I'd have 5,000 cats if my husband let me. So I
Right.
think for me, I would just say that I am someone who consistently declutters, is always looking to let go. But again, like to me, it's all the mental, emotional relationship, all that. It's a consistent, I'm a work in progress, and consistently do it. I think people get
Mm-hmm.
tripped up that, that they don't do it, or, if you don't clear out your house for 20 or 30 years, you're going to have a ton of stuff. And I think do you know who Eckhart Tolle is? I think I'm
Uh-huh.
pronouncing this, and he talks about, I'll paraphrase, I mean, he talks about how he had the night of darkness, right? And then he woke up all enlightened. And I was like, my head would explode, right? If I tried to wake up enlightened in one night. And so I kind of see myself as for people who are like, I just can't, I don't think most people can go from clutter to minimalist. Can people? Absolutely. I think probably most people can't. And so mine is, let's get on this journey. Let's get started. We start somewhere and you keep continuing. You're always a work in progress. Like we
Mm-hmm.
downsized a couple times. I'm like, oh, so now I'm like, I haven't, I with everything going on and moving, and just we've had a crazy couple years. I'm like, okay, then I'll go through everything I own again. It's got to happen this year because I couldn't do it last year. But I'm always doing it, right? Like I'd
Mm-hmm.
have runs to donate, or if they get stuff for Christmas, and what is it that I can release? So I think that I would say just constantly decluttering, maybe.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. We have, this declutter challenge that we, have people opt into if they want it, and they do it any time of year, but we always do it in January and then in July, like every 6 months. And I always think, oh, there's not going to be anything. There always is stuff to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know how it gets in, but it does. It's probably that I don't say no to things enough. It's, people, whatever, you bring
Right,
things into the
right.
house and you don't even know how it gets
Yeah.
there. And so I think, gosh, we do that regularly. And so I can't imagine not doing it and then having the things. But, I did live that life where I felt like the more things I had, the better. So I also understand that part of it. You talked about minimalism and all of that. I feel like for us anyway, it started as mental. Like it started
Mm-hmm,
that way. And
mm-hmm,
then it went
mm-hmm.
the other way to where we just felt like, okay, we just got to get rid of this stuff and feel purged off of our shoulders. And, but I'm thankful for it because it's a different way of living and not, it does reduce a lot of the, not only physical clutter, but the mental clutter in our lives, but it is a work in progress. This episode is brought to you by Southern Oak Artisan.
Southern Oak Artisan makes 100% natural soy candles that are not only aesthetically pleasing but are safe to breathe, since they are made with non-toxic ingredients, and they're not overwhelming like other candles you may be used to.
Between morning brew, lemon bake, lavender, there's just so many scents to choose from.
Southern Oak Artisan 100% natural soy candles are handmade in our home state here in North Carolina, but lucky you, They ship all over the U.S.
Yes, lucky indeed. Head over to arneradventures.com/Southern Oak Artisan, where you can grab our discount code and link to save on your soy candle purchase.
That's arneradventures.com/Southern Oak Artisan. It's also in the show notes.
And now back to the show.
I'm hoping I'm a work in progress till I take my last breath. That's my
Ditto.
goal. But I think I love that you brought up it's a mental thing. I can't tell you, I'm a big animal person, and I read this post the other night. I hate Facebook, but I was on Facebook and she was like, I need to rehome my cats. I can't. Where was she? She was at somewhere, maybe Melbourne, Australia, and she's like, I can't find a place to live. I have 3 jobs. I can't afford rent because it's gotten so ridiculous. And it's like, if we didn't need the big space, and she might not have been looking for it, but I've seen that more often. Or like, I know where I live. I'm like, oh, I'm in Wheeling, West Virginia, and you're paying what for your rent?
Yeah.
And so I think that if we could live with less, live in less spaces, and need that aha mentally before we can begin and go. But how much stress would that reduce? If you have we don't have a mortgage. We paid off our house. That was our priority. It's like we have one less thing that we have to worry about. But, you have car insurance, blah, blah, blah. When you add all those things in, and then it's kind of like it's a opposite, like, oh, I got to buy, right? So you have these tension, like, I want to get out of this rat race, but this is what is being shown to me all the time. But you have to say, you know what? I can make the choice to stop and do it. And it's like, we want to retire early. I'm like, I don't want to be working at Walmart when I'm 70. I mean, that to me is a nightmare. So what can I do? Like, I want to enjoy what I do. I don't want to be like, oh,
Yeah.
I got to go do this.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. And then the things also weigh you down. I mean, I just feel like if I don't have to think about, there's a million reasons you should declutter, but if I don't have to think about all the crap I have, then I can make plans to go do other stuff and enjoy an experience and all of that.
Everything's energy. So if you can say, oh, I'm not really aware of it, but I'm telling you, it is at the back of your mind at minimum. And you feel that. Like what I say to people is go into a really cluttered room and just close your eyes and breathe and get really centered. How do you feel? And then go to another room that's clear. Same thing. Close your eyes. How do you feel? Everything's energy and it affects us. It's like when you clear your space, that's why you can create the life you desire. Because if you're full of clutter, the universe, God, whatever your belief is, can't bring in new opportunities, can't bring in new people, because you're energetically saying, I have enough, I'm stuffed, I don't need any more, right? So when we clear that, we get the energy moving.
What is the biggest, I don't know if excuse is the word, but let's just say excuse. What's the biggest excuse you hear from people who don't want to get rid of something or things?
I think sometimes they're just plain out overwhelmed because there's so much stuff. The other place is with memories. My mom died, so I get it. But what I would say to people is, I'll never forget, before I ever became an organizer, I heard Peter Walsh speak, and it was an aha moment for me. It's like, we put our memories into objects, but if the object were to go, we'd still have the memory. Now, I also say that we still have it in our heart. Like my grandmother had, I was like, we've used this. So we moved and we had this her bedroom set as a kid. And I'm like, we don't have room for it anymore. I need to let it go. So my grandmother hasn't gone. My memories of her, she's still in my heart. She's still in my head. So memories are definitely a place where people just were like, I can't let go. The other thing is people say, I might need it someday.
Yeah.
And so what I say to that is, can you trust? And this is, talk about personal growth and taking a leap of faith. Can you trust that you'll get what you need when you need it? So kind of connecting with that spiritual thing. And then we're like, I've tried. And I said, okay, well, let's try that then. Can you? Because, the reality is you might be able to borrow something. You might be able to rent something. You just don't have to go out and buy something. So can you sit with that and see if that's something like you're willing to entertain that possibility?
Oh, yeah. I love that. That does take, that's a lot of mental.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, gosh, you really have to be in a good mindset if you haven't been, that everything will be okay, or that you can call somebody and borrow it, or have more of a community mindset of things than okay, yeah, I need this, let me go and buy this. So yeah, And on the other end of that, I think that, and I hear this from people, is that they they have so much stuff that they can't find what that is. So then they go buy another one. And then that's how that process starts because they're not organized with the stuff they have. And then they just keep buying more. And it just
Right.
adds up to this huge pile of
And
stuff.
then people will say, "Oh, I don't have enough time." And I'm like, "How much you spending on social media?" That's the first thing I
Mm,
say. "How much
yeah.
TV do you watch?" And
Hmm.
you have to be realistic. I hate those shows that are on TV because they're so unrealistic. It's like a hoarder in 48 minutes went to a clean home. Well, you didn't see the 3 or 4 weeks prior to the multiple organizers doing that. You didn't see the time with the therapist. You didn't see all the like it's not realistic. So if you haven't decluttered in 20 or 30 years, it's not going to get done in a weekend. So the
Hmm.
people need to have a more realistic sense of, okay, this is going to take this amount of time.
Right. So I know that you have written 15 books, and which is amazing. I mean, one book is amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine 15. So would you say that because of your lifestyle of keeping, clutter free, would you say that that also offers you the time to be able to write those books, or was it a labor of love that you just,
Labor of love,
yeah.
because I wanted, and I'm also good about repurposing content. So like in one
Uh-huh.
book, I'd say, okay, I did episodes on this. I have some stuff to work with. The journal
Mhm.
prompts are 12 of those. And so those were created because a lot of people want to DIY. And so these are to let you think, okay, what is my relationship clutter? And then I tell you how to take action so you can release it and move forward. And then I was like, oh, I'll create a 21-day challenge and people can have that in book form just to kind of jumpstart
Yeah.
them. And then I'm working on one being edited now for end of life organizing. But to
Mhm.
me, I wanted to be able to say I'm an author. That was
Mhm.
hugely important because I love to write. That's one thing I feel like I'm good at and enjoy doing.
Mhm. You brought up the end of life, which you were talking about your grandmother earlier, and I know I've told this on another episode, but it just relates so much. Uh, and I think the fact that you are an end of life planner does go really well with the professional organizing. When my grandmother passed away a few years ago, everything, every memory was in things for her,
Yeah.
and she just would, keep. Well, what happened was when she passed away, we, like a few of us from the family, had to go
Mm-hmm.
and go through all that stuff, which took so much effort,
I'm
and you're
sure it did.
already so sad, and you're going through all this stuff, and no one wanted to be there because then you're accepting the fact that she had passed away. But it's also, and she would never want us to have be sad going through these things. But I just think sometimes I tell people, I'm not trying to be a downer, but when you pass away, someone has to go through that stuff. And it's so hard on the people that you leave behind to do that. So I'm curious if you ever have sort of a dual work relationship with people on that topic when you're talking about end of life planning.
Absolutely. And so, what's interesting, I have a couple thoughts on this, is that the generation now that are younger than you and I, they don't want stuff. So these people who are your grandmother's age, my
Mhm.
parents' age, they are, the kids don't want the stuff. And so someone is, like you said, is going to have to deal with it at some point. There is a cost to that. There is time to that. So I encourage people, no matter where you are, but especially if you're older, start decluttering now. Don't make that burden on your kids. And the other thing I want to say that comes up a lot is guilt. I've told people this for a long time, and then when my mother died, it reinforced it for me. When people go on to their next adventure, they want you to be happy. They don't want you to have their stuff become a burden. I had a client once who had a basement full of her parents' stuff that had been in boxes for 20 plus years. And I was like, they don't want you to be unhappy. This is a burden to you. You can't even open the box. And then, we ended up clearing it out, and she was able to make it a studio to do crafts. And she
Mm.
found a passion in something she was interested in, but that clutter had blocked it from it. So I just, it kind of ties in with the memories, but people don't want your stuff to become a burden. And I think when people
Mhm.
have that aha moment, that helps relieve it because then they're able to release it. I mean, my father's been really generous and I've been going through my mother's stuff. And my mom wasn't a hoarder, but she had a lot of stuff. And so I have a big bin of pictures that I'm going to go through, and I'm going to take a couple, then pass it on to my brothers to look at. And I'm like, because I have the luxury of time, then I'm able to do that. But I say that's something, you got to give yourself a deadline because, I don't know if your grandmother, did you have a house, you're paying taxes, utilities, mortgage on all that, that can also become a financial burden to people. So when you do this and clear out your clutter, you are giving a gift to the people that you loved. It's peace of mind, like you talk about. It's like, grieving. I don't want to go through this.
Right.
And how important it is to plan. So when my couple years ago, and why I got into doing this was my dad sat us down with an accountant and attorney. This is what I want. And so I was like, oh, we're all, and God love my dad. He's like, I'm going to die before your mother. And, it ended up not happening. She had a stroke, couple strokes, heart attack, blah, blah, blah. And so my mom dies, and I was like, okay. And he was like, well, she didn't say if she wanted to be, she said, we had a conversation, we're going to cremate her. And I was like, hold up, Big J. We have met with these people. I thought, he's like, well, it was planned for me. Your mom never wanted to talk about it. So here we are grieving. And I say, okay, we'll trust you. You had a conversation, want to be cremated. That's what we're going to do. Now, some stuff, because he was still alive, we didn't have to deal with the burden, but I don't want to have to make those decisions when I'm grieving. And then, for me, I'm probably a little older than you. I have realized in the past month, I want my legacy to be an animal shelter. I want to figure out over the next 10 to 15 years, or sanctuary, I'm sorry. I want to create a cat sanctuary, possibly for dogs. We're cat people, but there's it breaks my heart. People, and that's the other thing. You don't plan for your pets. I see them thrown on the street. Yeah. I see them being put in a shelter, and they don't deserve that. So I was like, I want my legacy to be a sanctuary. So now I'm figuring out, hopefully I have more than 10 years, but let's start the process. I have grant writing skills. There are things I can do. I'm going to have a contest to have people, when you don't have to pay rent, you'll have this house to move into. And so starting that, because that's, I think, important too. I want to leave the world better than when I entered. So what impact am I going to do? Because to me, that's just as important as dealing with your physical stuff.
Oh my gosh, Julie. Absolutely.
This episode is brought to you by Base.
Listen, if there's one thing that bugs us to no end, it is traveling with someone who checks their luggage.
What a waste of time and money. First, you should just take less, and you can grab our travel prep list at arneradventures.com to pack smarter.
But one of the best resources we use is our Base carry-on rollers, which allow us to carry everything we need. And since it's the carry-on size, you don't have to check it.
I think the most common questions we get from people is how we avoid checking our luggage. And we always say, pack smarter and Base.
Head over to arneradventures.com/base. That's BEIS to grab the link to save $15 off of your first purchase.
You're not going to regret this purchase. Our family and friends and anyone who travels with us now has Base luggage.
Really, because they got tired of me complaining about them wasting my time.
That is arneradventures.com/base to grab the link there. It's also in the show notes.
Happy travels. And now back to the show. We rent here in Beaufort, and little did I know before we moved here that Beaufort has an overabundance of stray cats. And so there's a group here that was it spay, neuter, release? Yeah.
Yep.
They'll get that, trap them, and then spay and neuter them, and then bring them back. So there's a lot of pocket kitty colonies that we have on the island. Well, when we moved here, the person who lived near this other kitty colony near us just moved away. And so we happened to move here, and these cats who, yes, can, I'm sure, hunt themselves still, but they lost a lot of that ability because they were being fed by this person.
Yeah.
So now, of course, we didn't want to see them struggle. So we started feeding them. And now we have a little kitty colony that lives. But I think about that. I think, what if something happens to us? I mean, yeah, we have our dog and everyone's going to make sure she's okay. But what about these cats who are outside? And, I think about things like that. And then I think, what about people who don't have a plan? And then they have all these pets, not just outside kitty colonies, but just inside. So I love that you brought that up. because that's such an important part of, life and that transition.
I see it all the time on social media. Hey, they died. This someone, the relatives just threw them out, didn't want a pet. My pets, I couldn't do that. And so
No.
thinking about that and legacy and your stuff and what do you want? I mean, I want to write an obituary and I want it to be really funny. I'm like, I don't want to really dry serious. That's not who I am. I want to,
Yeah.
make sure that's fun. But how can I do whatever I can do so I'm not a burden to my loved ones?
Oh gosh, I love all of that. Well, we talked about your podcast. We love your podcast, Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out. And you do talk about ways to simplify and we talked about how some people don't want to be referred to as minimalist. And we actually said before we got on here, and I want to bring it up, that the way we found you a while back was that you were listed as like one of the top 10 or whatever minimalist podcasts, which I think that's absolutely what got us listening to it. But I think it's
Kind of
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And on one hand, I'm like, really, I would say, but I think probably minimalist when releasing your spiritual and your emotional stuff, I would, say okay with that. But, that's kind of, like I said, I don't think people who are minimalist, most probably would be like, oh no, with some of the stuff you do, but can I get you there? I want to get you on the journey. I want to get you on the path. That's really my goal.
Yeah. Yeah. What made you want to start the podcast? Did you just want to be able to help people in a different arena, or what made you start that?
So it'll be 10 years in August, but I was doing Reawaken Your Brilliance, going to a studio. And I'm like, I don't want to drive to a studio. This is in Raleigh. I was like, this is a pain in the bum. And, and so then I had some email, oh, podcasting. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. I can do this from home. And so it was wanting to have a format, something different. And I was really fortunate. I was kind of ahead of the curve and starting the podcast.
Yeah.
And no one was doing what I was doing. Like, they're like, oh, we'll talk about organizing and clutter, but it always focused on the physical stuff. I'm like, oh, there's so much more. And I wanted to bring all the personal growth work that I do. That's something that I wanted to help people. And, I believe in giving back. So this is, if you're motivated and you listen, I'm same with yours, you can get some stuff done. So at least I have an option for people who don't have a lot to spare, that they can start the journey. That was really the main emphasis behind it.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the last thing that you purchased and said, oh my God, why did I do that? Do you know?
Well, I would say the last thing that I purchased, and I need to set up because excuse me, I got an air purifier. I'm allergic to cats, and we have cats. So I am now on a getting allergy shots. I have great. He's like, what are you doing? He was like, we just need to do allergy shots, and come on. I said, I'm not getting rid of the cats. Okay. That's just how it is. And he said, Julie, you're going through this every season. It's too much. So it is sitting in a box, not set up. But part of that is my husband's fault, because that's his job. So I would say, that's probably, I'm looking around trying to think. I'd say that's probably it. So hopefully it will get set up, because I need it to breathe. It would help breathing, but I'm like, I won't get around to it. So
yeah.
It's just one of those things.
I'm allergic to cats as well. And I would happily open my door, let all 6 of those kitty colony cats in here if I could.
Yeah.
But yeah. Is your husband on board with your lifestyle? I mean, is he like that by nature, or he just kind of goes
not by
with the flow?
nature? It's like I told you earlier. So he grew up really poor, so it's more of a challenge for him. So I'm always like, gently, we're okay. Let's become present. When we're in the present moment, you're not that poor kid. We have enough to eat. We live. All my family is here in the same town. I'm like, we're never going to starve. We're never going to be without. And so it's gently reminding him of that.
I'm always curious about this too, with people who have similar lifestyles. Do you have a junk drawer?
I do not have a junk drawer. And I'm saying this, I know they'll probably come after me. The home edit wasn't the first people. It was yours truly 10 years ago saying, stop calling it the junk drawer, because that comes from my spiritual beliefs. If you call yourself fat, you're going to be fat. If you call it the junk drawer, then it's junk drawer. I'm just going to throw junk into it. So stop calling it the junk drawer. That's my big tip.
Everything has its place, even what's in a drawer of pens, candles, whatever.
Yeah.
Gosh, you're so right. You're so right. It's like when you, and I'm speaking from experience, and I'm learning to go through this in a positive way, but when you have, I have total money scarcity issues, like
Mm-hmm.
total. And so I know that when I put out into the world that I'm scared, that's what's going to happen, is
Right.
that there's going to be scarcity in regards to money.
Right.
Or if you
So
think
you
something's not
become
going to work out.
present,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're like, oh man, I'm afraid, I'm going to scare. Okay, what in this moment I can do? I can sign up for a retirement plan. I
Mm-hmm.
can go to Starbucks 2 times this week instead of every day. That is your point of power to change,
Yeah.
and you take those actions to make the difference. And then you're like, oh, that kind of brings down, oh, I made a plan. I didn't do Starbucks. I'm setting up a savings account so that it
Mm.
kind of removes that fear and helps lessen it.
Mm-hmm. I know we're going to talk at the end about where people can find you, but you do have, nuggets like that and like inspirational things on your Instagram. I know that I follow you there, and you put out a lot of good tips and information like that. And I was just thinking about the junk drawer.
You're
I
an
actually,
Instagram star. I'm not, but I like it because I post a lot of cat pictures too.
but it's lovely. It's lovely. Well, I feel like we should get to your fast five questions.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's this or that. It helps us, in a fun way just to get to know you better. So, number one is arrive early or fashionably late.
Oh my gosh, arrive early.
Right. Okay. Number two, store bought or homemade.
Oh, homemade.
Okay. Number three, books or movies.
Ooh, I'm a very visual person, but I read almost 170 books last year. We're going with books. I did the Goodreads
Wow.
challenge, and I'm after our interview, I'm running the library. 2 books I want are in. So, ooh,
Oh, I love we're big library people too, and I got an email yesterday that I have a book in. I'm really excited about it. I get more excited about going to the library than I do like someone giving me a book, or I don't know
I'm the
why.
same way. I love the library.
Me
One of my
too.
next lives, I'm going to be a librarian.
Yeah. Okay, number four, podcast host or podcast guest.
Ooh. Oh, that's a good one. You know what? I'm gonna go with guest.
Okay, why is that? I'm
I
curious.
think because I like interviewing. I like when you're a good host and you're a good interviewer, and when people do their homework and know what I'm about and ask great questions, and you have these amazing conversations that you know people are going to get a lot out of it. I think, and especially as I'm working on tying up the podcast, I'm going to go with guests.
Okay. Now that's first of all, thank you. That's really nice. But what do you mean tying up the podcast?
I'm going to stop I'm at 10 years. It's time to find the next great adventure. So I'll get you
Wow.
on before it, but so August or September, it'll be 10 years and it's time to move on. That's a decade.
Wow. I know. It's great though.
And I have 2 books that I want to write that are personal journeys that are really important to me, that are part of my healing process. So,
Mhm.
I don't have to tell you how much goes into podcasting and the amount of
Mhm.
time that it takes. So it's like we need to free up space for me to do other things.
Good for you for even recognizing that, you know, the space thing, which we're going to get back to in a second. Number 5, ketchup or mustard?
Oh my God, mustard.
Oh,
I
okay.
love salsa. I can never get enough salsa,
Ah,
but
me
I hate
too.
ketchup. I know
Well,
I'm
yeah, I
weird.
can see that. It's different. Well, I mean, yeah, it's made with tomatoes, but yeah, I'm with you. I love salsa, but well, I'm a little bit of a mixture of both, but I do like mustard over ketchup. I before we get to your final question that we ask everybody, I want to go back really quickly about burnout.
Sure.
So I know that life is not sunshine and rainbows. And I'm sitting here looking at you going, gosh, she's really got it together. But I'm sure, like you said,
Mhm.
there's things that you deal with and you have to take something away so you can make room for something else. Do you find yourself getting burned out because you've accomplished a lot? Or do you just have really good practices and techniques in place?
Great question. I think it's a combination. Now, something that helped me with burnout. So when my mother became sick, I was driving up from North Carolina to help care for her for, was it a year? So I'd spend a third of my time in West Virginia. So that really gave me a break. I'm like, something's got to give. My priorities, my mother, my family. And so I definitely, and then COVID, we had COVID.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't go to people's houses and do that. So that was one huge thing that has helped with the break. I also think the practices I do, being organized, and I have learned, I started my business in 2009, saying no, no is a complete sentence. And so what I've learned to
Mm.
do is, if I'm not a good match for someone, like I had to fire a client. I'm not like I'm firing him, just like, you know what, I don't think I'm the best fit for you. And
Mhm.
so you can get burned out. I don't think people sometimes think about this. You can get incredibly burned out when you have someone that drains you. And
Yeah.
so something that's been huge for me is I want to work with people. Like, if you're ready to roll, let's do it. If you're not, I'm like, don't waste your money with me, and
Yeah.
do that. And so I think that a huge difference to me is saying no. And if I'm not a good fit with someone, like, I just won't allow people to drain me anymore.
Mm. Saying no is a full sentence. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, Julie, the question that we ask everyone is, what does a life well lived mean to you?
I love that. I think that's important. To me, a life well lived is you've loved, and that you've made a difference in someone's life, or you've made a difference in an animal, that you have given back in some capacity. And you have a passion, you're true to yourself, but when in doubt, try to come from love.
Mm. Gosh, I love that. And I love when you talked about leaving things better than they were before. I think that's so important, physically
Yeah.
and mentally
Hmm.
and spiritually.
Because we're all connected. Everything's energy. So if
Yeah.
I become better and I work on my decluttering my challenges, it helps you. It helps our community. It helps everyone. Do you think our world, crazy world, is like it is, but everyone's happy? No. If they weren't, they wouldn't need power to go invade another country, right?
Mm,
They
mhm,
look, what is in me that needs to heal, right? And
mhm,
everything, always turn it on yourself. If I like get upset about something, I try to. I'm not always successful, but what is it in me that needs to be healed? Because it's not about the other person. Always try to bring it back on myself.
mhm. Oh gosh, this has been so great. I feel like I want to do it again at some point too, but please tell our audience where they can find you, how they can connect with you, to work with you, and all that jazz. And we're going to put it down in the show notes.
Thank you for doing that, and thank you for this opportunity. If they go
Mhm.
to reawakenyourbrilliance.com, I've got my store, got affirmation book classes, I got you covered, and then all the social media, and you can find a link to the podcast as well. It's all there.
Yeah. And your
One
end of
stop
life
shop.
planning and
Oh
all of that
yeah,
stuff is on there.
all that. Absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I cannot thank you enough. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Can I add one quick thing?
Yes,
I
please.
forgot. So if they go to the website, I have a free 10 ways you can declutter your life right now. I'm all about taking action. It's a free newsletter. It comes out twice a month. But bam, you have things you're like, maybe I can do a holiday, maybe health or whatever. I give you a take action right away. So bam, you get started.
Oh, we'll put the direct link to that too so that they can make sure that they access it because that's great. Well, thank you so much, Julie. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh gosh, well, it was such an honor to have Julie on the show. I knew I was going to love the conversation. Jerry, you always watch it when you're not part of the conversation. Did you really enjoy it?
Oh, I
No
did.
pressure, but did you enjoy it?
As I do all our guests, most all of our guests. Yeah, and every time I go, wow,
Yeah.
they're all just so good.
Yeah.
You think you're of the same mindset that there won't be many takeaways, but you can always learn from having these conversations from people. I always take a few tidbits. It seems like I'm running
Mhm.
around with about 2 or 3 things in my head from several people
Yeah.
pretty constantly. It's one of the things I love the most about interviewing our guests.
I know, me too. And, not to bring it down because I think it's just a topic that's life, but the end of life conversation that we talked about with her, it's so important, especially when you're talking about the amount of stuff that you accumulate and bring into your life that doesn't matter. It doesn't contribute to a really positive part of life. And I just hope that people do take that as maybe a positive reason not to have all this clutter and things that you don't need because you surely can't take it with you. And the people who love you and are behind are the ones who really have to start, you know, foraging through all your stuff and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And it's just a lot of pressure.
Well, it is, yeah. And I'm considering taking some of mine with me, but they tell me that's impossible. I'm trying to work it out though. But
Do you think your albums will go along with you through the pearly gates?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. But I'm working on it. But I think to be practical, no, you can't take it with you. And yeah. So
Right.
this has had a lot of value for us in that regard.
I think the biggest thing, and you are talking about taking it with you, and I know we talk about this, like when we're talking about our declutter challenge or things like that, if you have moved, which, we've moved a few times, but if you have ever moved, the amount of crap that you have, you just start going, oh my God, why do I have this? Why do I have this? And think about that. Think about you're moving and you're already like dreading all the crap you have to move around. When you're no longer in this world, that's what everyone else has to deal with. Is all of your stuff that you didn't even want to move to the next place.
No, that's right, and we've seen a few examples of that, and to put a good spin on too. You said that we've moved a few times, but in a way that the good I take from that is you do get to inventory and every time, and you realize how things accumulate. I've done it enough times not to forget that when you do move, things are there that you just go, why?
Yeah.
So that's why now we're pretty intentional about keeping our stuff to a minimum.
Yeah.
If this episode resonated with you, or if you know of someone who would benefit from anything we talked about today, or any episode, our guests, or anything, please share it with a friend. It's a great way of supporting the podcast and us, and we really appreciate it.
Another way of supporting the pod is by leaving us a 5-star review rating on the platform you're listening to us on. Oh, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button because that also supports us. We would love that.
You can always find us, links we refer to during the show, and any of the podcast sponsors at ournerdventures.com or linked here in these show notes. And until next time, enjoy that journey you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Adios.
Arrivederci.
Au revoir.
Adios.
Sayonara.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Dos vidaniana.